Even the best defenses can't stop a perfect throw and catch, and the duos on this list were about as close to perfect as you can get. Today is the top 5 greatest quarterback-receiver duos in NFL history. Philip Rivers and Antonio Gates. There's no better place to start than the most underrated connection in history. Philip Rivers and Antonio Gates beat people in every way possible during their 13-year run. During their early days, it was a lot of Rivers just exploiting the matchup nightmare that is Antonio Gates, a college rebounding wing turned tight end receiving threat. As Gates and Rivers grew older, and as both their athletic traits diminished, they created a chemistry like few have ever seen and beat people with their minds. Rivers was never the hardest thrower, but his anticipation of which way Gates would cut on their patented tight end option routes made it easy for Gates to get open against any one-on-one. Rivers put it in stride for him every time. There was no guesswork and never any breakdowns. As soon as Gates beat his guy off the line, Rivers would have the ball in between his eyes and Gates would walk into the end zone. The two did it time and time again, and more automatic every time, down to a science. That science led to Rivers and Gates hooking up for 89 touchdowns in their 13 years together. The results crushed every record. The two became NFL's version of Stockton and Malone, Chargers franchise holders in every passing receiving category. When Gates retired, he and Rivers were the all-time most-scoring quarterback-tight end duo in NFL history. Until another connection came along, that is, but we'll get to that later. Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin. When Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin were drafted to the Cowboys, the days of America's team and the legendary Cowboy teams from the 70s seemed long gone. Dallas was the laughingstock of the league and went 1-15 in franchise QB Troy Aikman's rookie season. It would take two very different individuals to come together and make history. Troy Aikman was the coolest blend of Californian and Oklahoman, a quiet, reserved, and cool-headed QB. Michael Irvin, on the other hand, was loud, braggadocious, and every other cliche that wide receivers are stereotyped into being. From the very first 65-yard touchdown pass of Aikman's career, the two would be forever intertwined, inseparable. And by the end of the 90s, they were all the football world could talk about. Their connection on timing routes made them nearly impossible to stop. When Aikman was in a pinch, he looked in Irvin's direction, and it was a pretty good idea, as the two connected over 700 times for 11,000 yards and got into the end zone 60 times. Those numbers may not seem like much, but they were top 3 all-time when the two retired. And while they may not have the statistical dominance of some of our other duos, Irvin and Aikman are on the list because they might be the most clutch pairing ever. Defenses knew exactly what was coming, and it didn't matter. Irvin would take his 2 steps and slant across, and Aikman always put it right on a dime for Irvin to convert in the biggest moments. They took that 1-15 team and dominated the 90s. Dallas became just the second team to ever win 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, making Irvin and Aikman the winningest quarterback and wide receiver duo in NFL history. They built a brotherhood even beyond the game, and honestly, you couldn't bring up one without the other, a true dynamic duo. Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. There's not a better example of a legendary yin and yang combo than this one right here. Tom Brady is the GOAT, the ultimate competitor, always locked in, like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. Early in his career, it was all business in New England. There was no time for fun and games, just championships. Then Rob Gronkowski comes along, one of the most fun, larger-than-life personalities the league has ever seen. His friendship with Tom helped show us his more human side, and that he was a fun guy off the field. But on the field, these two showed no mercy. The two alone were the best at their respective positions, but together, they were absolutely unstoppable. With Brady throwing to him, Gronk broke the single-season tight end touchdown record at 17 in just his second season. Now, at the tail ends of their careers, Brady and Gronk have connected for the most receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns from a quarterback-tight end combo ever. Gronk is the all-time leader in receiving yards per game from a tight end as well, at 64.8 yards. Almost all of that is with Brady tossing him the ball. When Tom Brady left New England to head to Tampa, who did he hit up first? None other than Gronk himself. The two became the only duo to score a touchdown for 2 separate teams. With 99 total touchdowns, the two are the second all-time in touchdowns for any QB receiver duo. But in the playoffs, Brady to Gronk is its most potent. In Super Bowl 55, the Rob-Tom connection hooked up for their 13th playoff TD, the most by any duo in history. They still have more in the tank too, as Tampa looks to repeat this year. Payton Manning and Marvin Harrison. It was the perfect storm. A QB that saw the game like an offensive coordinator and a wide receiver with all the tools and a work ethic that was second to none. That combination, Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison, own every possible quarterback-receiver duo record. The pair connected for an insane 961 receptions, 12,881 yards, and 114 touchdowns. 114. They're still the only pair to score triple-digit touchdowns. Think about this. There's only 6 other players in history with 114 receiving touchdowns total, let alone 114 from one single quarterback. The two could probably run the entire route tree in pitch-black dark, eyes closed, and still complete 9 of 10 passes. That once-in-a-lifetime chemistry was immediate. Peyton's first career TD went to number 88. Together, their passion and work ethic was only rivaled by each other, driving them to near perfection and complete unguardability. Harrison was far from the biggest player on the field, but his uncanny route running, tough contested catches, and even Manning called him the fastest player he'd ever thrown to, making it easy for Sheriff Payton to get the ball to Harrison early and often. The two were cut from the same cloth. Harrison learned early. He said when he messed up in a game, he would be working on that exact situation all next week in practice. I was like that. I had the same mind frame. The two were each one of a kind. That's what made their connection legendary. Joe Montana, Steve Young, and Jerry Rice. Now, we know what you're saying. You can't have two different pairs as the greatest duo of all time. But come on. If we didn't do it this way, Montana Rice and Young Rice would be 1A and 1B. Montana and Jerry Rice both reset the standard for their respective positions, and they played together. How could they not be the greatest duo? The two gave us some of the most iconic performances in history, including 18 receptions, 363 yards, and 4 scores in 2 Super Bowl victories. The Montana-Rice connection wouldn't bring in near the statistical ridiculousness of Manning-Harrison or Young-Rice, but in their 8 seasons, Joe Cool and Jerry hit for far too many big moments. They didn't do bad in the record book either, connecting for an ungodly 22 touchdowns in just a 12-game 1987 season. Rice had 6 1,000-yard seasons with Montana throwing to him. Montana didn't do too bad either, winning 2 MVPs during that time. Right when everyone thought it couldn't get any better than the Montana-Rice connection, Steve Young came along. In 7 seasons, Young and Rice connected for over 10,000 yards and 92 touchdowns, making Montana and Rice's 67 scores look minuscule. Jerry Rice is plain and simple the greatest receiver to ever put on shoulder pads. The fact that he got to play with arguably the greatest QB and the greatest dual-threat passer ever is as close to cheating as it gets. The 2 all-time connections helped Jerry Rice get to a then-record 13 Pro Bowls, and more importantly, it led to winning, which all great duos should do. And boy, did they win. Once everything was said and done, there were 3 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and 4 league MVPs won by the 2 connections. So, the greatest quarterback duo was actually a trifecta. Why argue about which was better when we can just appreciate the greatness of both? What about you guys? Who's your favorite quarterback-receiver duo ever?